So thank you for attending. And more than that, thank you, must I say, short notice, to some of my ladies who've jumped in at the deep end to just kind of support with this. We've given a bit of context as always, but just as we're recording, this is the final, I suppose, in the first series or the first section of Finding Financial Security. As Nicaila said, there is future funding to kind of bring about the evolution and whatever comes next through the pipeline. The joy of this program is that it's been heavily informed from day one by you in terms of what you need and what you've asked for and how we can support women in the community, women in the voluntary sector, social enterprise, etc. But generally just women having a healthier dialogue with themselves and their finances and getting to grips with what that really means. So here we are. Who's it aimed at? Well, of course, we always do this intro because this is not just for us in session, it's for those watching back on YouTube. And ultimately, why did we build this program? It's because there was a need. Nicaila and I talked about this extensively last year. Cost of living got worse and worse, and the need grew in terms of all of the themes that we've touched on. So what's coming up tonight? Well, we're going to talk about wills, pensions, and we're going to have some humanity, some natural conversation. The key thing about this is that it's always conversational. Advisory, yes, but very loosely. We never pin our hosts, our panel supporters to the wall. It's all about that lived experience that we want to hear about. It's that honesty. And what we're looking for is that honesty, really, just because it invites us and it engages us to do the same and to just have that reflective moment where we think, if we can talk about this in an open, honest forum, maybe we can move forward together and learn from each other. And that's the beauty of this. Okay, key things. In 2 weeks' time, we've got another peer support session. That will be wills and pensions focused as well. We're going to look at free will kits in that, which is a bit more pragmatic as opposed to our usual holistic side. But I do have someone coming in on that to advise us on how to maximize free will kits and kind of where to find reliable, cost-effective, pragmatic legal advice with regards to this, so we're not just willy-nilly ad hocing and trying to troubleshoot on our own. To that end, don't forget, we do have the support fund in place that you can still apply for. It's super easy, and when I say apply, that is a very broad brush. All you need to do is drop an email to Nicaila, Anna, or myself to say what you need the money for and how it's going to kind of advance you in your enterprises, or even if it's just to plug a gap that you need a bit of support with. That's open. As I say, don't forget it's available. So just drop those emails in. After we've had some conversation with Stacey and with Helen and amongst ourselves, we're going to do a few little bits of evaluation and talk about how we can inform the next steps. And Nicaila's going to come in and support on that, where we just kind of prod and poke and evoke what you're feeling and what your thoughts are in terms of getting together face to face and how the next steps are going to develop. Always is the case. Workshop, peer support, resources and info. Last time we had our peer support session, I sent out a beautiful PowerPoint. It was absolutely jam-packed, full of resources where you could go and signpost and get some help in terms of mental health, debt advice, 101 different things, all of the things we've been talking about. So I hope that helped. Also, there was some beautiful mindfulness and some EMDR practices in there. So if you haven't received it, drop me a message and I will resend that to you, because it was absolutely packed to the rafters. Okay, here we are, session 6. I don't know how that happened, but here we are. Pensions, wills, and next steps. Again, we're going to talk about this from a very human factor, and we'll come on to that in a bit more detail. But it's all about, do we have pensions? Do we know what they're for? Do we know where to find them? Do we know how to maximize them? How are we engaging in our future proofing and our future planning? Do we even know whether we're signed up at work? How does that happen? Is it matched by your employer? Have you opted in? Have you opted out? Have you decided you need the money now? So you've decided, actually, I don't want to pay into that pension. I'm going to put a hold on that. We're going to talk about the positives, the negatives, and why it's important to think about the future. Equally, we're going to touch on wills a little bit more, because what we really need with that is some pragmatic legal advice. That will come on the 28th of June. We're going to talk about it in a wider setting. We've got Stacey here, who's going to give us just some drop information, very much off the back of the housing, where we're thinking about our families, our children, and how we're safeguarding things in terms of life insurance and how we're leaving our assets in a pragmatic way. Equally, we've got Helen here, and I've invited her on, admittedly last minute, and bless you for attending. We're going to talk about that real life factor and what it is to be a woman in business, a woman in industry, and have to juggle everything from family to finance to work to gender equality to actually thinking in the periphery. Have I got myself in order? Do I know what's coming down the pipeline? Am I safeguarding my future? Have a thought about it? If you have, wonderful. If you haven't, what can we do to make sure that that happens? Okay. So here we are on screen. As is always the case, we've got a bit of blurb because I can't introduce you unless we've got some blurb. So please do just take a moment to read about Helen. As I said before we started recording, Helen and I came into contact when we were both shortlisted for Mentor of the Year North Power Women Awards this year. It was a joy to be nominated alongside such powerhouse women, for sure. And even more so that we've been able to draw upon that kind of community and that collective power. And I know that Simone would be absolutely thrilled to know that we're working together and doing this as a community tonight. So Helen, I'm going to pose the question. Financial resilience. I'll put you on the spot. When I say financial resilience, what does that mean to you? Have we lost Helen? Oh, good gracious. Yes, indeed. Dropped off. Okay. Let me see if she, okay, we'll hold that thought and see if she manages to make her way back round. In which case, Stacey, bless you. We're going to have to put you on the spot whilst Helen finds her way back in. Not a problem. These things happen. Oh, honestly, here we go again.
I'll let her in. She's there.
Oh, we're there?
There we go. I think that we might be able to flow as you want. So if you backtrack your slide, she'll be here any minute with a bit of luck.
Lovely. Okay.
There you
Okay,
go.
Helen, we got you booted out there for a second. Don't worry. It is the nature of the beast. Of course, it is this collaborative online virtual reality that we're all living in. I was about to introduce you. I've got a little blurb on screen just to summarize. But my key question to you, having invited you in here, just to give us a bit of context, and also what I always want in this is for women to relate to somebody who's lived it, done it. You know, you've got a wealth of experience in terms of financial services background, which in itself is a very unique perspective on these topics. But my key question to you, first and foremost, is what does financial resilience mean to you? What does it look like?
Oh, crikey, really good question. For me, it's something actually that's really close to my heart, and I would say I have financial resilience now, but it's taken quite a long time to get here in many ways, I think, through having my own business. And it certainly wasn't something I had as a child. For me, financial resilience, this is a very very informal definition, would be around to greater or lesser extent that a bomb, not necessarily a bomb could drop, but a rug could get pulled from under you and you wouldn't go under. Basically, it would be around being able to keep your head above water and crucially still be able to have choices and the chance to move forward in life. It wouldn't yeah, it wouldn't take you down, basically. It would be a setback rather than a big full stop.
Absolutely. And, you know, I've read some of your background and I've listened to some of your podcasts in terms of, you know, the work that you do. And I know that you've got your professional career, but I know that your passion project, you and I have talked about this on a one-to-one, your passion project is mentoring, coaching and sharing that power. And just the way you've so succinctly, you know, defined what financial resilience means to you, that's exactly the point, isn't it? It's that you can kind of stumble, fall, but have the ability to get back up. And you've used a really key word there, which is you've still got choices. And that is what this program's for. It's to bolster and kind of bully up that financial resilience to make sure that we do still have choices. Okay, so of course the topic is wills and pensions, and I know that your financial background doesn't lean into this, but as a woman and as a professional woman and as a mother, you know, a mother of 7, might I add, and just wow, look at you taking on in no small feat to do all of these things and manage a household and a family and do it with such, you know, candor and joy and still find the time to attend on a Wednesday night as you do. To that end, what does your future proofing look like? What in your world, what is it to safeguard and to plan ahead? What does that look like?
I clearly, with 7 children, a big priority for me is getting to a position where as much as we can, I can give them a leg up in life now, but certainly when I am no more, when I'm dust, that I leave something behind. Some people will say, you can't take it all to the grave, blow it. You came in with nothing, leave with nothing, and why are the kids entitled to it? I don't share that view. That's not to say that I believe in handing them everything and not enjoying the fruits of of my labours now. But life's tough, and if I can pay a little bit forward to the kids, whether that's helping them pull a deposit together for a house or whatever it may be, then that's what I want to do. And planning for the future is obviously about retirement as well, and pensions do kick in, and I am no expert on these, but I am the grand old age of 53, which means I'm rapidly approaching the age of 55, which is hand on some money that I have got locked away in pensions, and that's something that's starting to come more to the front of my mind as well now.
Absolutely. And it's a strange thing, isn't it, in terms of where we go in terms of pensions. We're so busy with mass media scaring the living daylights out of us, telling us that we're all going to be working to the age of 70. So it's interesting there that you have noted that at 55 it is the time that we can start thinking about drawing down on that pension. That is kind of the open gate. That's when it all begins, the countdown in terms of your ability to access that pot that you've set aside. In terms of pensions, is it something that you've thought about in terms of workplace pension? Do you pay into the pot, and is it exclusively through work, or have you got a private pension if you're happy to share that?
Yeah, no problem. So I've had a life of a number of chapters and turned my back on a very safe and well-paid corporate career when starting out in business with my husband now. But in that former corporate career, I was lucky enough to have, in the 2 companies that I worked for, Barclays Bank and then a big life insurance company, both those roles afforded me what was then a non-contributory pension benefit, basically. So, a chunk of money each month was paid on my behalf into those company pensions. So, and they've been untouched in all the years since. Over and above that, as an employer, we have a workplace pension. We have to, by law, that our employees are able to join. They don't have to join, but we as an employer have to give them the option to. It's down to them. If they qualify, they have the right to join it. My husband and I don't pay into that ourselves, and haven't taken that option ourselves, because we're actually employees of the company. Even though we're the directors and sole shareholders, we're still seen as employees, so would qualify. Instead, the company has a pension fund for us, basically, where Mark and I, we as directors of the company, they've taken out, the company's taken out a pension in our favour, so we do it that way instead.
Absolutely. No, and thank you for the transparency on that. It's really, refreshing and enlightening to hear. Just the array more than anything. The fact that you can speak, from a business perspective, in terms of you understand the mechanics and you optimize and utilize that option for your employees, but also that, sorry, bear with, just letting people in. They are drip feeding as usual. But yes, no, absolutely. I understand it intrinsically. And it's an interesting thing that throughout our careers, and this is something that, I'm 36 and I wasn't aware of until recently, that I sporadically, having moved from industry to industry, and I think this is very indicative of the times that we don't tend to stay with the same employer for as long as kind of historically we might once have done. And to that end, I have an array of pension pots that I have collected with different pension providers and different employers. So to that end, I had to kind of look into what it was in terms of consolidating a pension pot. So I'm gonna pick on Stacey here very briefly. Stacey, do you know anything, just in broad conversation about consolidating pension pots? Is that something that you've come across in terms of where people have overlooked it and not considered that they've got little pockets of money dotted here, there, and everywhere?
It isn't an area that is my area of expertise, but
No.
consolidation of pensions is actually really important. On a little side note, my husband's got a few and we were looking at them a couple of weeks back, and it's really important to do that, because when you've got lots of little pension pots, so you might have 2,000 in one and 10,000 in another, but you might have 40,000 in another one, for example, depending on the pension scheme that you went to. Every single pot is accumulating over time, and with like compounded interest, for example, the stocks and shares and the investments that the insurance companies are using and stuff. Now, I don't know what you've gone through, because unfortunately I lost connection. I'm now on my phone instead of on the laptop, because I missed literally from Helen coming back. I went, and until you just turned around and said, let's ask Stacey, I missed the whole conversation. So yeah, I mean, the thing is that if you've got £2,000 pension pot, for example, that one there is going to grow much, much slower than one that's 10,000. But if you add your 10,000 and your 2,000 together and you put your 12,000 in one pot, then that is really going to grow more exponentially than them being separate. So yes, it is important. I always say choose like an IFA, independent financial advisor, wisely. Perhaps look at recommendations and things. And with independent financial advisors, usually if you want independent advice, you're going to need to pay for independent advice, because quite often, especially in the past, and I fell foul of this many years back, is that quite often what you feel is like an independent financial advisor, they're usually tied to like various insurance companies, pension companies, investments and things like that, which obviously then give them the commission in years gone by. So of course you're not necessarily getting the right expertise or the right information or the correct information that is for yourself. I know things have changed now, and the FCA has sort of cleaned up a lot of people's acts, but I still think it's just as important today. And it is, I would say, definitely, if you've got loads of little pensions lying around, definitely look at cleaning them up. And then the other thing in the background, depending on how old you are, for example, you may have had some pensions from some like building societies or insurance companies that went PLC. So you might even have some shares somewhere as well. That's another thing to sort of look at. But yeah, so the answer in short, yeah.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And again, so that's just a provisional advisory, guys, that, often when we find ourselves, we wake up one day and absolutely it is that time that we want to step into the voluntary and charity sector. And the whole reason we're embarking upon this together is because we've come through Flourish. And if we've come through Flourish, it's entirely likely that we're ready to start game changing and start building that startup or kind of that CIC or that social enterprise or that charity, etc. And to that end, I suppose it's a natural sidestep just to kind of ask the ladies who are on the call, if you guys are working in the voluntary and charity sector at the moment, or if you're engaging and starting up, does that give you a sense of financial instability or trepidation in terms of not having a pension necessarily put in place, a workplace pension? Because if we're self-employed, these are things that we need to start thinking about. A few months ago, we had the credit union ladies on and they were talking about saving those pennies. The pension is exactly the same philosophy. So if we are self-employed, we need to start thinking about putting those pockets of money aside.
I wonder, Fran, if it's worth, I might chip in while people are thinking and sort of
please do
what they want to say.
Yes.
So yeah, one of the reasons we wanted to make sure we included this, and when we thought about the financial resilience program, we thought from everywhere, from you know, how people pay themselves enough or they don't, how they, their financial stability in terms of personal finances, housing, different kinds of security, and thinking to the future, or, you know, that what gets left off the table, this topic of wills, pensions, and even like child trust funds and all sorts of stuff. But just as a quick one, you know, knowing full well, you know, years ago, I mean, I'm thinking back, listen to this, it's making me think back. You know, I've been in work since I was about 9. My lovely uncle, who had me as a bit of slave labour for at least 5 years, didn't pay me pension, obviously. I was just happy with my little brown envelope, and that was great. But I got my first job when I was 15, working in retail, and probably worked for a handful of different retailers from then to 21-ish. And I would have had bits of pensions. I remember there were pensions I was paying into then. Have I backtracked them? No, I have not. You know, something I need to still do. But then when you get into like a bit more of a meaty career, and I was working with Unlimited at the time, for off and on for quite a chunk, there was definitely a pension there. There've been other employers where I've had pensions. So I'm falling foul of not mopping up and connecting and joining the dots. So it was kind of a prompt for me to think, oh, if I'm not doing this, who else isn't doing it? And just the only other quick thing I will mention, well, 2 quick things I'll mention, you know, which might resonate with people or not. You know, so the first thing was, you know, I stopped paying into a pension, you know, when my marriage broke down. I got enough to try and juggle and pay for, frankly, having no financial support from my ex-husband particularly, and when it comes to my personal finances or paying the mortgage or anything else. So it just wasn't an option. So I stopped paying into a pension for quite some time. But I've known, you know, since turning 40 something, I'm like, oh, I've got to get back on this bandwagon. I've got to find the money. I've got to make the sacrifices and just do it. My first step was to go back to the pension that I know I've paid into for the longest and just call them and say, I know I've had this pension. I know this is there somewhere. Can I pick that back up? So it was my first, it's a bit like your family history, isn't it? It's my first port of call. I'm not saying this is the right thing to do, but if you know you've paid into a pension for a while and you at least know the name of it, even if you've not got the reference, you know, I went back to them, they found me on the system, or I probably had a bit of paperwork somewhere I could kind of refer back to, and I started paying back into that. So that was my first thing. That I've then since, you know, conscious I've got to get back on the bandwagon and join the dots with these things. And I know there's ways of doing it. I just, hopefully through this session and future sessions going forward, we will be piecing together, you know, how to think about that. So I don't know whether anybody here's got like those hodgepodge sort of examples. The last thing I'll just quickly say on this, and one of the reasons we've done this topic as well, is when you set up as self-employed, or when you work in the voluntary community sector, particularly been volunteering for years, or working for small charities, or working for startups, pensions are not a thing, or they're not at the forefront of your you know, associate company that you might be an associate or a freelancer for, or they're not at the forefront of your mind because you've not figured it out yet, or you know, volunteering is not going to get you a pension. So we're very well aware that a lot of the women we work with are not paying into pensions, and it's worrying us. So if we can get a handful of people doing this, and if I can get my backside into gear and sort myself out as well, that would be you know, a good outcome over the coming months. So I'll lay down the gauntlet there. I don't know if anyone else has got any interesting insights or thoughts on this topic and where they're at with it.
I will, but I'm in mid-tea, so I'll be quick. Sorry.
That's all right.
I've got loads of hodgepodge pensions, and I just put off sorting them out because I'm not really sure what to do with them. And I'm not at a stage in my enterprise because I'm only testing out ideas. I'm not even earning any money yet, so I'm not at a stage to pay into any. And I really like what Stacey said around combining them and the reason why. So I really need to look into that, but I'm still a bit lost as to how to do that. And to be honest, I don't even fully understand what it is. I struggle. Nobody's ever kind of sat down and explained it to me. I don't find it particularly interesting. So I'm not kind of motivated to look it up myself. And so I just don't really understand it, to be honest. And that's kind of where I'm at.
That's absolutely fair enough, Kirsty, and I suppose that's why we're bringing this topic up, because it is one of the things that falls by the wayside, mostly because it's not the kind of thing that we're educated in, not at all. It's, you know, we spend our time at school, college, uni, apprenticeships, whatever it is, we go straight into work, and then all of a sudden we're supposed to assume that we understand these financial relationships. And, you know, one of the earlier sessions we did was talking about relationships with financial institutions, which is where I coined Stacey's delightful name, which is the human mortgage advisor. And it's entirely on that premise that we don't have the education. We just have the assumption that all of these things fall into line. And I suppose that's the point of this, is to just hash it out. These sessions are always based on kind of loose conversation and advisory from people who have been there, lived that, do have pensions, don't have pensions, thinking about pensions. And, you know, from my own personal experience, as I say, consolidating my pension was not something that I'd thought about until I came home from my intermission. And Julie, I did do that. I did some research. So as a starting point, following this session, I will send out some signposting and some resources as always, because I do have some excellent links and kind of verified, accredited options in terms of short, snappy videos online that show you how to go, where to go, what to do. But as a starting point, something called Pension Bee. That's where I began, and that's where I started my little journey in terms of consolidating, mostly because it pulls all of your information. You don't have to go raking through the archives of, oh God, who was I working for in 2005? I've got no idea. Essentially, it goes off your national insurance, it goes off a bit of address history. You fill in the gaps as and where you can to make their life easier, but they connect the dots for you. So as I say, I'll put that link in the chat.
I wonder, Fran, as well, just coming back to Kirsty's point about it's not that interesting. It isn't that interesting, but the bit that, you know, if we can put a rocket up anyone, it's that, you know, what happens if you don't piece together your pensions, sort out paying into a pension, or try and ring fence some cash to go towards something? You know, what happens later in life where you haven't got that additional top up, you know, knowing the cost of living as it is now, you know, not to put the fear of God in people and, you know, the fear of the future, but it's that, you know, what if I, you know, the incentive is what happens if I don't, really, and the incentive, like Fran's just said, is it can be easier than you think if you just put a few hours a month, or a few hours for a few weeks into it. It's amazing to see what can kind of come back from that.
What I was going to say was that if you go onto the government website about pensions and start putting in your details and everything, it will tell you, you know, what age you're supposed to be retiring at. Because of course at the moment it's 67. It was going up to 68, but as far as I'm aware, they kind of like put that on hold for the moment, presumably due to everything else that's going on in the world. But also as well, it will tell you, you know, what you're likely to expect as your basic state pension, and how much you've paid in terms of national insurance contributions. And when you do look at it, it's actually really scary, because when you work out, if you're on a full-time wage and you're on a minimum wage, okay, and when you look at what your pension's likely to be, it's almost half.
I was just coming back to say, actually, the other incentive is when you look at those statements. I haven't gone as far as looking at the government, but you look at those statements and you see what it's worth and whatever, you kind of, your heart sinks. So it motivates you. I shouldn't say that. It motivates you to think, you know what, I need to find another tenner a month to go into this thing, or whatever it might be, and or
Absolutely.
some way of making sure older age isn't so bad. And I think of the people around you. I don't know whether the thing I think of sometimes, you know, in my older sort of relatives, you know, my mum worked in a bank, and you know, she paid into pensions for years, and she, you know, she's part of the WASPy generation, you know, unfortunately, for those that know what that means, where they've been shafted, frankly, through the way the pension system's affected them. And she paid into all sorts for years, and because she worked for a particular bank that then, you know, things didn't, you know, it was a strange set of affairs when the Royal Bank of Scotland got bought out. She's lost heaps there. So on the one hand, you know, well, why do it? Why bother? But she's still adamant that it's crucial. My uncle, he paid into pension from being about 15, 16. He's a hairdresser, and he's paid all sorts in, and he started drawing his pension at 50 something. He still works and he's 70 something now, but the buffer and the amount of money that he's been able to create in his pension from paying young, it's always inspired me to just think, my God, you know, granted, he's not married, he's not got kids, so he's probably had more disposable income to throw into it, but it, you know, you can only sort of learn from what you hear, who you see around you, and doing the research that's just been described. So I'll shut up, carry on with my tea, and not take up time. But it's whatever it's going to be to trigger you to do this. You know, what you're going to do to make a start or to make a reconnection of those dots.
Well, that's what this program's for, isn't it? It's the catalyst, because you know, it's when we started doing research into what this program was going to look like and how it was going to be kind of user led and informed, it was very much on the basis that we are dealing with very diverse women from very diverse backgrounds with very different learned behavior when it comes to finances. And you know, I was raised in a family that had immense financial resilience and, you know, surplus money, definitely, but never taught the pragmatism of what it was to save and what it was to think about pensions and to think about investments and to think about wills, because there was always just money in the background, etc. And so pensions, I just always figured, and I'd say this as a very white, privileged, entitled, middle-class woman, that pensions weren't really going to be an issue for me, because once my parents had moved on from this mortal plane, it was all coming to me and my brother. And ultimately, my pension was going to be my inheritance. It was going to be assets. It was going to be their investments. It was going to be their pension. So at the age of 36 now, thinking, well, I've paid into a pension for a good, since I was 21 in a variety of aspects. Thank God I have worked to the extent that I have, because otherwise I don't have that nest egg. I don't have that safety net. And a lot of us who have got sort of disbanded and complex family relationships and things like that, where we don't have that support network necessarily, we're not even thinking about, you know, as we'll come on to in terms of wills and assets and lineage and things and how to kind of navigate inheritance tax. That's not even on the periphery. It's very much a self-sufficient enterprise, which is save, plan, future-proof. This all goes back to what we were talking about with the credit union. Phoebe, you've got your hand up. Yes.
I do have my hand up, and I am completely with you on what you've just said about family. And and my mum was the same. But then when her dad died, the recession hit, and all her inheritance disappeared. And she had been relying on that. And yeah, so talking about pension B, I registered and then got so overwhelmed with it, because I'm like, well, I started work in a coffee shop at the age of 14. I know that I worked at Tesco's when I was 16, and I know that there's definitely some money there, but it's just, I found it not that straightforward doing the pension B thing, and then also got scared that they're then going to take some of my money because they've offered me the service. So yeah, and I know that is the easiest option, but was kind of just completely thrown by it.
Okay. Well, okay, these are good things that, you know, every time we have these conversations and we think about that starting point, this is why Nicola and I know there's more to come for this program, which is essentially these first few months while we've been doing this, it's been conversational and it's been information gathering, and hopefully it's been insightful and some positive and effective signposting, but also it's got that dialogue going, it's got that thought process going, it's got, you know, I know that some of you are going to go away from this and think, if only Nicola to consolidate that pension pot and start thinking about those things. I know that some of you have already signed up for credit unions, including myself, you know, engaged with debt advice. So all of kind of the ripple effect of what this program has begun. However, with that being said, I know what's needed is some real action. This has been a lot of talk and very, very necessary. But what we need is to come together and think about how we do put those things in place, where we do have workshops to sit down, very much like Phoebe, me saying, let's go for coffee, sit down and do that step change. I think what we need to think about is a more formalized, safe space where we can come together and action those things, where we can sit down and facilitate going through a pension B consolidation from A to Z. Talking it through, debunking the myths and making it an easy process. If we do it en masse collectively, where everyone's coming up against the same sort of barriers, we can do it. You know, equally, we can have a session on how we do that. I've already spoken to Nicola about bringing together a kind of free will writing session with a lawyer friend of mine who's going to come in and help co-facilitate that, just to get those things going, to lean on those networks that we have, but also to reinforce what Flourish is. It is about learning from what you've said and what you need, and then putting it into action, because otherwise we go round and round. So no, I will take that absolutely by the horns and bear that in mind for a face-to-face workshop where we can think about, yes, in the same session where we do how to write a free will and how to engage with a solicitor to think about whether or not it's straightforward, whether or not you need legal advice, etc. We can have a tackle pension B. We can look at how we consolidate those pensions. Absolutely. That will be coming through the pipeline. So thank you. Informed and taken on. Kirsty, I can see you've unmuted. Would you like to
Yeah,
engage?
I was just going to say, reflecting on the pension thing, like I know where all mine are. I've got documents. I've changed my address every time I bloody move. But I was just thinking, like when I was working part-time, like I worked for a charity for nearly 10 years, I was working part-time. And so I was just thinking about the total income coming into the house, all went back out again on various things. So even with that, before my marriage breakdown and with that more of a stable situation, there still wasn't really enough to save. And that kind of, you know, when you're living so close to like the wire all the time, it's just the thing that always seems to get knocked off, because it's like, well, we actually need food or we need XYZ. I know that it's important for the future, but that's not what we need right now. So it's that kind of trying to figure all that out as well, and not maybe being in a position to save into it. So I always said yes when the organisation said, let's do a pension, because at least they were paying into it. But then it's that sense of not being able to afford to put anything in there.
No, absolutely. I understand that. And this is the thing. I do think, you know, and I'm aware when we have these conversations that sometimes we're talking about house purchasing and sometimes we're talking about pensions, and it's a pipe dream, because often we're in financial situations, current, past, present, whatever it may be, where that is a luxury we just can't afford. And
Making me think though, Fran, as well. I mean, part of the reason we're doing this, and it might kick in the next phase, as much as we need to come together and take action, and there's more specialists to bring in and more discussions to have, big part of what we do is like, how can we influence things? How can we fill a gap? How can we do something creative to kind of do our best guess at trying to solve a few things? And it strikes me that amount of money, because I know, because I was in the same boat, Kirsty, about 5 years I didn't pay into a pension because I just physically couldn't find the cash to do a lot of things, let alone even think about something like that. So it's not a lot of money. It might be 10 or 15 or 30 pounds a month, you know, that you need to put away to do this stuff. And, you know, where are the agencies coming in to say, you know, take a window out of your pension. We know you're in circumstances where it might be a year, 2, 3, 5, you can't pay into a pension. We'll do that for you. We'll take that burden away for you. So there's options, you know. I'm just thinking out loud there, but you know, while the people invest seed funding into stuff and into creating ideas, you know, paying for somebody's pension for a year or two, you know, there's no reason why that couldn't happen. Anyway, I'm just thinking.
No, I love that. And again, that's exactly the point, isn't it? Is troubleshooting and finding those gaps and drawing on those networks where we know there's a need. It can be filled. It's financially pragmatic if we find the right people to talk to. So no, absolutely. You know, I talked about this in a very separate and very different way with the Coming Home project, ladies. As we know, a very different kettle of fish. And it was interesting. And one of the things that absolutely terrified me, and this is just, you know, for information's purpose, is that one of the ladies who was convicted for fraud and went through a proceeds of crime order had her pension taken by the Crown Prosecution Service and the Crown Court and liquidated because that was deemed her only asset. So when she had to pay back this proceeds of crime, she didn't have a house, she didn't have a car, she didn't have tangible assets, but what she did have was a private pension. And that terrified me in terms of consequence. But again, very different. But when we look at the Coming Home project and we look at the financial resilience and how the two things come together, in terms of kind of not reoffending and finding the tenacity and the want and the need to reintegrate into society and get back on the career ladder, to know that you're starting from day dot with no pension at the age of 50 something, it was something that I found so overwhelming that could happen. Complete side note, ladies, and a slight tangent there, do forgive me, but I think it's how we reframe looking at these pension pots as a little pot of money. Of course, they are kind of the money at the end of the rainbow and slight kind of leprechaun-esque in that aspect. But it's just about reframing it and thinking about the future when and how we can, when we've got the mental capacity, when we've got the financial capacity, of course. To that end, we'll move on swiftly from pensions because I know we've focused heavily on that. And I'm keen to kind of just discuss a few other things in terms of future proofing with Stacey, because we've got her kind of expertise here. Life insurance. How do we feel about life insurance? And as just an entry point, has anyone on the call got life insurance already in place?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, love that, Kirsty. Good.
I've always had it. I got it when I got my first mortgage with my husband years ago. And then when we separated, I decided that was a way that I could future-proof stuff for my daughter, because that's actually what happened to me. So the death of a parent as a teenager was the way that I received some money. And so that's always kind of been on my radar, although it's a lot more expensive than it was before. So, you know, me and my husband were only paying a fraction of what I'm paying, because obviously I'm older and I've got health conditions or whatever. But yeah, I do have it, and I set it up a couple of years ago. So yeah.
Wow, fascinating. I paid into stuff for years, and yeah, when I was younger, and I thought, oh, it's the right thing to do. I'm a grown up now, I'll do this. You know, I did it when I got married, and I did it when I had a child. I think having a child makes you think, oh, you know, I've got to do this. So, but again, stop paying into a pension, stop paying life insurance. I just couldn't physically manage it. But it's great to hear the way you've prioritized things, and I think, you know, good for you. And I think it's only now, so for a little while it was like, so what if something happens to me? You know, I've written a bit of a will for my son, and you know, God forbid something happened, I knew he'd be with my parents for a while, or you know, things would happen. But where I am right now, you know, you get older, the business that I'm running, you just never know the minute. So I just think it's been on my mind to get back into the life insurance side of it, just because, you know, age and, you know, circumstances, and you know, I know now life's different. He's 16, things have changed again. So yeah, and you know, parents are older, you know, so you make your judgments with the best knowledge you've got at the time, don't you, to try and do the best you
can.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Stacey, in terms of future proofing, would you be inclined to say, especially, of course, I know it's tied up very heavily in terms of mortgages and house purchasing and things like that, life insurance a good investment, investing in you?
Any investment that invests in you is a good investment. The thing is that the irony is that they call it life insurance, but it's death insurance, really. So, you know, it's basically a good investment for other people around you. So if you have got kids, absolutely, that kind of is a given. That to me is like a no-brainer. You know, if you got children, you need to provide for them, and if something happens to you, you're not there anymore. You have no say over what happens to them, despite putting in a will, what have you. You've got some money there that then they can be, you know, more financially secure, have a bit of safety, that sort of thing, because you're not going to be there to be able to sort of like look after them, or you know, pull them out of a hole if something goes wrong.
There's that other side, Stacey, as well. It's just, I meant to say, and it ties in with all this, is as sole traders, as freelancers, as people running small entities, you know, if you get ill, if you get, you know, some sort of, you know, disease, long-term illness, and you can't work, you know, or you need to take a chunk of time out of work. I know if I got cancer tomorrow, if I had a stroke or whatever, I'm stuffed, you know. So it's those sorts of things we think, oh yeah, and yes, it's making me twitchy and thinking, oh, gotta sort this out.
So yeah, so I mean, basically, you could have like critical illness cover, which is something that can be integrated into the life insurance policy as a subsection, or you can have like something that's just standalone critical illness. So, I mean, you know, as women, especially if you're self-employed and starting out and things like that, or even if you're not and you're employed, you might only get like statutory sick pay, or you might only get 1 or 2 weeks full pay. You know, you might be a slightly luckier person who has 6 months full pay, 6 months half pay. But you know, the critical illness cover covers you for serious illnesses. So of course it's more expensive, but because there's more risks, so that might work better for some of the women here than others. So again, that's another type of insurance policy. There's another one called family income benefit. Family income benefit is like a life insurance, but it pays out a monthly income. So for example, you know, if your bills and everything's like, I don't know, £1,500, £2,000 a month, you can put that in there and you can have it over, say, you know, you've just had a baby and you take that out of the policy, you could have it up to the age of 21, for example, so 21 years. So if anything happens within that time frame of 21 years, you know, the family would then draw upon that policy if you passed away, and then it would replace the monthly income of you, whatever it was set at. And that can actually be a little bit more cost effective sometimes than life insurance. So there is that as well. Of course, mortgage life insurance, that can be quite cheap at the younger that you are, but that's usually decreasing term because it goes alongside with the mortgage. So as the mortgage goes down, so does the life insurance. You know, what may be better for women, especially, you know, if you've got children and things like that, is having what's called a standalone policy and having a level term. So if you were 25 and you took out a level term policy for 150,000 and you had it up until the age of 75, 80, for example, the premiums will still be quite low, because even though it's going to be over that particular term and you are older, at that point that you start paying into it, again, it's a bit like a pension and investments, because you're paying into it, the risk becomes less to the insurance company, because by the time that something could happen, or the likelihood of that, because again, it's all done by risk assessment and stuff, you'll have paid in quite a big chunk anyway. So there are lots of different options, and there are lots of sort of positives for it. A lot of people do see, especially when they're single, no reason to have life insurance, especially when they have a mortgage. But I've always been one of them. I mean, my mum brought me up, so she was a single parent, and she was always like, the pre-man was always round, you know, for all sorts of different life insurances, endowments and stuff like that and what have you. And again, at one point, just like everybody else, you know, she had to stop because you know, there's only so much income that you have and you've got to budget. The same here, you know, we had to sort of like take you know, take a break with it all, because there's only so much you can budget with, depending on what your income is and what your circumstances are and what life stage you're at as well. But yeah, I would always say, if you can do it and you can afford it, even if it's only just a £5 policy, do it.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, from personal circumstances, we had a loss in the family fairly recently, and there was no will. And it's strange actually, because we had a session, one of our Flourish sessions a few months ago, where we were talking about wills very briefly, and I thought, God, he doesn't have a will, that'll complicate things. And then God, you know, terrible tragedy, and we lost him. And thank God for the life insurance in that situation, because there was a life insurance policy that insured funeral costs for covers and X, Y, and Z. And there was kind of fairly immediate finances whilst we had to go through this kind of quagmire of finances. There was no will. Who would it, you know, it was next of kin situation. Of course it was, because that generally is how it goes. But if there was no will and no life insurance, it would have been a monstrous outgoing for the family to have taken on, you know, a funeral that cost circa 5k what a monstrous thing. So in terms of life insurance, I do think, and it made us think, you know, as a couple in our 30s, absolutely, the pragmatism. And I know it does seem a little bit doom and gloom, but there's no harm in future proofing. Heaven forbid something happened to me. I would not want anyone in my family to have to suffer financial hardship because of it, if it was something that was avoidable in the majority. In terms of wills, again, Stacey, I know this is absolutely not your remit, and we kind of touched on this, but in a broad sense, do you think life insurance kind of is a good safeguard? If so, for example, I'm thinking in my personal circumstances right now, don't own my own home, don't have any particularly tangible assets to leave, a little savings account that's by the by. Life insurance would be a much better, safer bet for my family if I paid into it effectively and there was a guaranteed lump sum at the end of it, that when I toddled off my morsel coil, they had that safety net, whereas I don't necessarily have assets to hand down.
Yeah, I mean, that is a really good idea. You can also put your life insurance into trust. So, you know, if you're putting your life insurance into trust, you have your trustees and who are the people that you trust with the assets, so to speak, the money, and then you've got your beneficiaries as well. So, you know, in that respect, you sort of ring fence it from tax, like, you know, inheritance tax and things like that. I mean, the tax threshold, I believe, is still at 325,000 per person. And so if you've got no assets, if you've got no property and things like that, then depending on what your life insurance policy was, it may not even hit the inheritance tax threshold. But if it did, then with the trust, that would be good. So when you have wills, when I was doing the mortgages and things like that with the life insurances, we never wrote wills, but we would always state that, you know, ideally you should have a will, because, like as what you've mentioned, if you don't have a will and you die intestate, it's got to go for letters of administration, and letters of administration takes months and months and months and months and months, and can actually take a few years. My friend, who, it was slightly more complicated because her father was a British citizen but had lived abroad for a number of years, and we're on year 7 and we still haven't sorted out all the finances of his situation, and that was because he'd not written a will. And so people might think, oh, it'll be straightforward, you know, it will just go to, you know, my partner or my kids, or who, you know, I haven't got a partner or kids, so my parents, or it isn't as cut and dried sometimes. It really isn't. So if you make a will, you know, you're going through probate, and probate makes it, I mean, even probate 6 months, but you know, it makes it a lot more cut and dried and quicker. And again, there are, you've already put together, you know, you're putting together like 3 sort of will options, and it wasn't that long ago, a local hospice was actually offering free wills. Absolutely.
And I was going to say that there's a huge, for obvious reasons, there's a huge amount of support and free support and pragmatic support from charities on the basis that you can leave, you know, a charitable aspect in your will. So they support you in the writing of the will. They talk you through the process. They get it all straight for you on the basis that, of course, there's a little tenet there for them. And absolutely, why not? So no, you know, if you're passionate about something, for example, in our house, I know full well, should Sarah choose to write a will anytime soon, it would be on the basis that charitable donations go to the Christie, 110%. And so what I would say, and again, when I send some kind of IAG and some just references for people after this session, it's on that basis that you can go to charities. Like, for example, one of the main ones that's offering support at the moment is Bernardo's, in terms of free will writing. They do webinars, they do face-to-face drop-ins, they've got web chat, 101 different things, and they have got a free will kit. You can get free will kits in the post and things like that. Of course, there's always the tenet that you need witnesses and bits and pieces, but fundamentally, a will is a very straightforward thing if you want it to be and if it can be. And one of the easiest sources of information to kind of talk you through that process is the gov.uk website in terms of wills. That is, you know, dare I say, for a lot of these things that we're talking about, pensions, as you say, in terms of finding out what your pension is and when you're going to retire and how much that pot's going to be worth, etc. gov.uk. In terms of will writing, it'll talk you through kind of the easy, the more complicated, and then a list of verified, safeguarded professionals that you can go to. I've got a link that I'm going to pop in the chat, Money Saving Expert. I'm always akin to go to Martin Lewis. He is, you know, the guru of all trusted financial signposting. Again, same thing, free will kits, low cost will kits in terms of who you can go to. And then, dare I say, ladies, of course, we've got this little pot of money here for the Finding Financial Resilience program. If you want to go and find a legal professional who is going to support you in writing a will, if you want to go and get it validated through a solicitor, go on. I can see Nicola waving.
I was going to say the same thing, you know, whether it's, you know, you want this £5, you know, life insurance policy or whatever it is, or the will option or something else, you know, where we can help people build that security. And there's some confidence and some focus to do a bit of that. Yeah, why wouldn't we help in that way? So no, thanks for flagging that, Fran. That was my thumbs up side.
Good.
Wonky thumb up.
No, it was yes, no, very Marcus Aurelius, that. Good seal of approval from Nicola. But no, absolutely. Stacey, may I ask, and again, feel free to decline on the basis it's a personal question, do you have a will?
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay. And when did you kind of put that in place? When did it come into your periphery to think, do you know, I really need to sit down and do that?
When I had my son.
Absolutely. And you know what, that's always the catalyst, I find, in these financial safeguardings. We're all fast and loose when it comes to future proofing, and we're kind of moving paycheck to paycheck, or kind of, you know, even when we're planning ahead. Without children and without kind of family members or people we need to support, people who are dependent upon us, we don't think about anyone but ourselves, because ultimately we can survive and we can thrive and we can just kind of do that. But, you know, Nicola's the same with Josh. Absolutely. These things are becoming more and more prevalent and more to the forefront as we start thinking about our babies, our future. Our
well, it's
legacy.
interesting though, isn't it, as well? Because again, it's years later, I'm there thinking, oh God, you know, if something happened to me now, what my will says is not what I particularly want to happen. You write your will at a point in time, and at the moment, you know, where Josh is going, the situation and what's happening is not, I mean, it's not a problem, but it's not the ideal either. So I need to rehash it. I mean, to be fair, what is he? He's turned 16 in a few months, so he's still got a few years of what ifs, you know, or however long, you know what I mean? And yes, there's different points in time where you think, oh, I've got to figure this one out. So yeah, I'm so glad we're running these sessions. I'm kind of very selfishly put them on board for myself as well as everybody on our network, because, you know, it's a bit like lifelong learning. It's a kind of something you have to keep tabs on over time as well.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. And that essentially a will is a live document. It's not something that we write and then box off, because things change, circumstances change, our preference, our circumstance, you know, it's something that should be as up to date as it possibly can, because, you know, should the time come, we don't want that kind of, you know, head to head at probate and the clash of the titans over he said, she said, it's mine, I'm not sure, what were their intentions. Well, let your intentions.
You don't want to be crossing your fingers on your Ryanair flights, do you? That's, you know, it's what we had to do recently. It's just like, oh.
No,
anyway.
exactly. No, we like it to be as clean cut as we can. And as I say, with the amount of free support, we're verified and, you know, safeguarded, absolutely. We don't want, as Stacey's quite rightly said, there's a lot of free, in inverted commas, advice and support out there that's often tied to other financial institutions where you're signing your life away. So we just need to be sensible about it. Ladies on the call, wills. Phoebe, we've got kids, we've got partner, we've got jobs, life insurance, wills. Thought about it? Or is it just something that's way in the future and currently it's rent, it's utilities, it's food, and it's birthdays, etc.?
Yeah, so life insurance I've always just kind of like put that hand in hand with owning a house, not any other reason other than owning a house. Will, I don't know, I can't remember, I have mentioned previously that the kid's dad, for my 30th birthday, my birthday present, I thought I was being taken to Paris. No, he had a will done for us, which is obviously not
Very
even
romantic.
not even with the paper it's written on anymore. So so there was a life insurance policy when the kid's dad bought the house that we were living in, and I was on that life insurance policy. I don't know whether that still exists. Like I have no idea whether that is still a thing anymore, or when he sold the house that he just cancelled that policy. I don't know how to look into it, because it wasn't mine. I was named on it, but yeah, no idea. And I see adverts all the time, like pop up about like mum life insurance policies, and I just go, no, overwhelm again.
Well, no, that's fair enough. And to be honest, the marketing has got quite canny, and it has tapped into that kind of, I got one today even. I imagine my algorithms, because I was researching relevant things for this, poly life insurance. And it was very specific on Facebook, and it said, if you're 36. And I was like, oh, no, yes, if you're 36, as I recently turned just a few weeks ago, now's the time, don't drop dead tomorrow. It was an interesting kind of scaremongering tactic, which, again, I've had times over the past sort of 12, 24 months after my intermission thinking, do I really want to pay into that pension? I could really do with that £72 right now this month. Oh, I'm not sure. Is it actually going to come to anything? Or I could put some of it in savings, but I've stuck with it, just because I'm trying to think of the bigger picture and the pipeline and the focus. And ultimately, I don't want to, and forgive my loose language, piss £72 away on something that means nothing today and will mean everything, in 40 years when I'm old and greyer. Absolutely. Okay, Kirsty, pension. How do we feel?
Do you mean a will or a pension?
Well, we're gonna touch on both. Absolutely. So pension, pipe dream or current?
Pension is something I need to look into. I need to look at consolidating the ones that I've got, and then once my enterprise kind of gets up and running a bit more, then I can think about paying into one. I do have a will, so I sorted out a will when I separated from my husband. I felt like that was an important thing to do, so I'm all right on the will and life insurance. It's the pension, and I think the thing that puts me off, like I said earlier, is because I just don't understand it. So I don't know, and like Phoebe said, I've looked into combining them, but then there's a cost to do that, and then I just feel overwhelmed, and then I just leave it because I'm not sure what to do. Whereas the will and the life insurance, I kind of felt like I knew what I was doing, so that felt okay.
Okay, absolutely. And I'm taking all of that in my stride, absolutely. And as I say, further programs and kind of ideas coming through the pipeline will focus on that, because there is a need. There is an absolute need. It's not just within you guys, it's within Coming Home as well. Pensions are a complete alien concept for people unless you work in financial services or you've been taught inherently how to save, invest and future-proof through family pragmatism. Possibly it's just not something that we can get to grips with, and therefore find overwhelming when we're busy living through a cost of living crisis, building social enterprises and trying to be strong, empowered women, not having mental breakdowns and fast approaching burnout. So no, lots of smirks amongst us, which says everything. Absolutely. Okay, so we've touched on pensions, we've touched on life insurance, wills, and I suppose, are they necessary, all of them, intrinsically? Raise of hands if you think you need the trifactor for your financial security, for your financial resilience. That's the dream. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're working towards. Kirsty's got a hand up.
I would say so, but I go back to that. You can only do what you can do.
Exactly.
You can only do what you can do. And sometimes affording to pay, covering the bills, having enough money to get to work, whatever the essentials are critical, and anything else that comes is a bonus. And I think we know that the government are there with their measly pension sort of pots as that backup stance, but you invariably need more than they're going to offer. So you've got to figure something where you can around that. And I really, I like sort of Kirsty's stance where she's paused the pension, but she's gone for, life insurance right now, because I think it depends what your circumstances are, but you just got to think about your circumstances and think what you can do that's going to help you and what you can afford, isn't it?
Exactly that. It's what works for you. And I suppose the most important thing to say whilst we're talking about, there's no shame in not having those things, not having your shit together and not having the ability right now. There's no shame. This is all about informing you to take those steps when you can and if you can. It's not about forcing you. It's not about, we're not all on the same journey. Absolutely not. We're all at different stages. We're all in different places. And this is very much about just giving you that knowledge so that when the time is right, you can reach out and you can say, hey, Nicola, right, you can come back and rewatch this video on YouTube. That's the point. We're just having this open conversation to just say, these are the things that are available. And when the time is there, I mean, don't get me wrong, guys, absolutely. In my ideal world, yes, life insurance. Yes, will. I'd love to have something to leave behind for a start. So for me, it's very much thinking about saving for that deposit, having some savings, pennies, not pounds. I keep going back. I found that so profound, that lady talking to us about savings, and it impacted me so in such a positive way, because I've been looking at it all wrong. I've been thinking I need to save for a rainy day and that needs to be thousands. It doesn't. I just need to get into that positive behavior to know that if, and I do, I've now got a savings account with a couple of £100. And, if the cat needs an emergency vet bill, or if something happens and I need to troubleshoot a bill, or if something breaks in the house, I'm not going to have to go and take out dodgy credit. I'm not going to have to go and borrow money. I'm not going to have to go and, heaven forbid, break the law. Never going to happen. But, it's having that safety net and how we go about it. And it's building that trust amongst ourselves to know what we need and how to approach it. But also, to be able to ask. Absolutely, that's what this is for, is to be able to reach out and say, do you know what, I need this. I have no idea where to go. I'm feeling completely overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. Fran, Nicola, can you help me? Yes, absolutely. That's why we keep bringing Stacey in on that basis. Every time I get in touch with Stacey, bless you, you're always kind of first in line. And it's because there is a need, and it's because she is a woman with, humanity and sensitivity and a wealth of experience that just gives this. And guys, I know you'll agree, it gives it some realism. It's building, as I say, when we think about those relationships with financial institutions, people like Stacey should be a terrifying prospect and have been a terrifying prospect, where we have to face our demons and talk about life insurance and wills and mortgages and trusts, and how we do that, how we face our debt, our credit reports, and all of these things, save for deposits, pay the rent, etc. We're doing it together, bit by bit. That is exactly the point. Okay, I've noticed we've actually got a few more people hiding in the wings. So Claire, can I pick on you? Are you feeling engaged? Thrilled? Absolutely. I always love hearing from Claire. So you've been listening silently in the background. Life insurance.
Not for the whole thing.
No, not at all. But
just
for our little panache and hash of life insurance and wills. Have them, want them, need them?
Well, yeah. all of the above. So I used to work for Royal Mail, and I started working there when I was nearly 17. So on your 18th birthday, when your pay goes up, they just throw you into the pension scheme. So it just happens automatically. You never think about it. They're just in there doing that. You don't have to do anything. And I've got quite a big gap between kid number 2 and kid number 3. There's a whole thing about getting rid of sort of number 1, replacing him, finding someone decent, getting married, blah, blah, all of that. But I did write a will. It was never signed off by anyone. But since I wrote that will that was never signed or checked or shown to a solicitor, I've had like another 2 kids. I'm married to somebody else. Pretty much everything that's in there isn't a thing, because my eldest kid is now 33 with kids of her own. So everything's a little bit different anyway. The pension, when I went self-employed the first time, it was like, oh, well, my Royal Mail pension is just sat there, and I know it's a decent one because Royal Mail unions have done it. It's not as good as my husband's because he joined his earlier. It's not as good as people older than him, all of that, but that's just sat there. Since then, the occasional time, like when I do like casual teaching at the uni and when I was on an internship, the uni just throw things into a pension scheme that I don't really know how to get into. Signed up for a Penfold thing where I put £5 a month in. I've got, I think it's 150 quid saved in my pension pot.
Woohoo.
It's good.
At some point I need to rein them in. The will's a definite we need to do, but I don't personally have anything. I've got a drive full of like dodgy cars, and I've got a caravan that I bought on eBay. But we do own the house, but my name's not on the house. So even if I don't need a will, Mike needs a will. I think we already had the random conversation about my husband's joint bank account that he's still got because he didn't sort it out. That's on his to-do list to sort out. So I feel like there's stuff we need to do, but it's almost more important in a way to get him to do the things than it is to get me to do the things. I think my focus at the moment is earn more money so that you can get regular payments, because when you've got regular money coming in, covering what's going, and not sort of like, oh yeah, I paid that one, I'll have to pay that one late. That playing that game, there's a limit to how long you want to play that for. But whether it's insurance, whether it's, because even my baby's 18, so the life insurance is slightly different, but certainly in terms of pension, because my plan is to live to be 100, it's like I don't see that working well if I've got to keep staring at my screen for the next 48 years. I don't see that going well. So at some point I want to retire, and whatever was in my Royal Mail pension, and I don't think I've contributed to the state one since, I need to understand it a little bit more and then put something in place. I felt like the £5 a month was a better than nothing, but it's only just better than nothing. So
Hey, listen, only just better than nothing is still something, and I'm here for it. And the thing is, it's all about that positive behavior, isn't it? It's getting into that.
I just want to show you something, if I'm allowed. I disappeared off. I've got dinner finally cooked here. I'm going to show people this in case it'll make people laugh or make them feel better, or make them do something a bit similar. I wouldn't recommend this, but I'm not like into apps.
Oh,
So
God.
this is my like crazy folder of all my gubbins, and I'm like, I've just gone in the cupboard. I'm like, where is this thing? Because I was trying to post something in the chat, and I thought, well, I can't ask them that if I don't know myself. And the question is, if people want to share examples of where or who their life insurance or wills or pensions, feel free to share. I think I was trying to think. So I know that my pension is with Standard Life. It was a pension that I had with Unlimited years ago. I know they did 12.5% and I did 12.5%. So it's kind of the best option I had throughout my career. And I paid into it for a chunk. So I was saying before, that's where I thought, God, even if I can't piece together all this stuff, if I can find that one and pay into it, that's better than doing nothing. So that's what I did. And I know we've had talks before from Scottish Widows, and they always seem pretty switched on and pretty friendly and pretty clear and very pro women. So I think there's a way. I know a few people might need help with this stuff, but between Fran's contact and various others that we've got, there's definitely a way of getting some proactive sort of sessions together. I don't think we want to spend loads of time being talked at on like what things mean. You can read that on a kind of on a glossary or something, but it's that, almost one-to-one kind of piecing stuff together and getting shit done.
Yeah. Something that Claire mentioned, I just want to mention as well. When you're looking at your wills and your assets and things like that, if you have had a partner, you've been married and you're divorced, make sure you've gone through your financial settlement. So, because I've been married for like 27, nearly 28 years, or so, it's something that I've encountered, but other people have encountered, and it's actually quite scary that if you don't do that financial settlement, if something happens to you, technically your ex-partner could have a claim.
Absolutely, that's what made me sort things out, and not mentioning any names or pointing any fingers, particularly if your ex-partner wasn't good with money or had a habit of getting into debt or whatever. They can come.
I think sort of
you can have to sort it out.
I mean, luckily me and Martin were both fuckwits at the same time, so that was okay. We didn't actually get married. There was no savings or any planning or any of that. But because Mike, my husband's been married before, he was Mr. Sensible, but he's also Mr. Sensible who would rather not have a slightly awkward conversation like 30 years ago. And his ex-wife still gets a bank card every 3 years that gets delivered to our house, which is the most random thing. And it aggravates me every 3 years, and every 3 years I have a little bit of a snarl about it, and then I go about my day.
So for you then, this
The
is going to
banks
be
don't
really
help us
important.
though with that, do they? The banks enforce that you have to both sign this thing up. You know, my son's got a bank account that I've not been able to close down. Probably could get in a room. We probably could just about get in a bank and figure this thing out. But it's that,
Yeah,
you know, you kind of avoidance, and you know, the banks should improve that.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, there's no, as far as I can tell, the quickest and easiest way would just be for him to just open another account and then just go about your day. But at the time, it didn't seem like that big a deal. I mean, when we first sort of bought this house, because he already owned a previous house, I was like renting off the council. And I remember going into Abbey National and just like, oh, so if I've got a CCJ, it's not going to matter getting a mortgage, is it? And they pretty much, you know that look that they give you, like, how thick are you? Turns out it was very thick. I just didn't know it at the time. And a lot of our financial stuff started from then, because he'd done things before. My credit was in the toilet so far down the pipes that no one was reaching it. So I just kind of left him to do it. And we moved here in 1995. So it's not as if it's just all been kind of, it's fine, we'll leave it. But at some point, it's the sort of thing where, yeah, it's on the list. It's not top of the list, but it's on the list.
We've all got that list when it comes to finances. I know we do. You know, it's whatever takes priority at the time. So there's nothing wrong with that. Yes, Stacey.
So again, another sort of kind of free resource, a woman called the Legal Queen on TikTok. She quite often does like short TikToks about sort of the legalities of getting divorced and financial settlements and things like that, and wills and so on and so forth. So again, as a fun and, well, not necessarily fun, but slightly more interesting way of learning about this sort of thing, it may be worth looking at her. And it was actually her that appointed me for a friend. And Claire, with what you've said, I would strongly advise to get yourself on TikTok and listen to some of these as to what she says, because it sounds to me like the ex-partner still has something there with your partner now financially, which means that if the will isn't sorted and it's ironclad, you know, it could very well be that you're left in a very, very precarious position should things go wrong in the future.
Yeah. And to be fair, we're not that young either. So it's like, it's the stuff that you already know that you should be doing. But when you're kind of 25, there's a big difference between 25 and nearly 52. And we are at that stage where, so it's like, for example, like the house is paid off and stuff like that, which is really good in some ways, but my name's still not on it. So as long as everyone's all that happy days, it doesn't really matter, but it could. And it's like, I've got friends where their relationships have changed and they've been totally screwed over in so many ways. Yeah, not great.
No, good. But yeah, thanks for that, Stacey. I love a bit of TikTok. Claire is equally a digital nomad like me, so absolutely we'll be scrolling until about 1 a.m. I imagine now. But okay, with that in mind, I think we've you know, it's a fairly meaty topic, but I think we've kind of poked and prodded at the essentials in terms of pensions and life insurance and wills in a conversational manner, I know. But to that end, what I'd like is for Nicola, I suppose, to come back, because what we talked about when I saw Nicola, and I'm going to do a little plug here, when I went down to the Flourish Action Hub at Heaton Chapel train station. Very cool. Go check it out. It is mega bright, breezy, and Nicola's there, and there's coffee. So absolutely.
And
but more than
the aircon's outstanding as well. I was just making Phoebe jealous before.
No, tick, tick, tick. But in terms of kind of next steps, what we wanted to do was kind of a little survey in terms of how you feel this has gone, what would work best in future in terms of, well, Nicola, I'll let you, because we talked about kind of what kind of, well, I suppose survey questions we wanted to pose in session, and then with a little follow-up in terms of how we evaluate how this program's gone and what people have got out of it and what they want to come next. Yes, Stacey, you need to shoot. Thank you so much for tonight. I'll send you an email just to touch base. Amazing as always.
So am I still? Oh, you can hear me clattering my plate. Well, I'll have to confess my questions are on my other laptop. I've not cranked up yet. So if Fran's getting it to hand, that'd be awesome. But
okay,
I can ask my usual stuff. Where so there's a couple of bits. I guess there's a few of you on the call here that have been to different sessions, and it would just be good. I haven't prepared any polls or anything like that. It would just be great for people to have a think in the chat and think back. You know, what have been the highlights of this program so far for you? You know, we'll just give you a minute to sort of a couple of minutes to have a think. But you know, looking back, thinking back over the last, you know, well, nearly 4 or 5 months, hasn't it? It's been several sessions. What, you know, and I don't know whether flagging up that slide from where it outlines what the sessions are that you showed us at the start.
Yes, let me do that.
Maybe flagging that up just while people have a little think on what have been the highlights for you, just to try and help think, you know, what stands out. It might be a certain topic or a few topics, you know, thinking back to the sessions that you come through and you thought that was worth me coming to. So it might be, you know, what I guess the first question might be, you know, what thematically, there you go, what thematically stands out as having been good for you. Just pop it in the chat, whatever comes to mind, really, in terms of hearing from other women. There was Una, there was Jenny, there was Karen Howarth, shared stories about their own lived experience and what financial resilience meant to them and how they were trying to, as I say, push through the burn. There's me sharing all sorts of weird and wonderful tales at times. We had the people from CAS, didn't we, in the community savers model. We had Sheila from the credit unions talking about debt management and other things. We then spent quite a bit of time looking at housing from different angles, different perspectives, because we're all in a different boat when it comes to, you know, housing and what's going on for us. I think we've obviously spent time, you know, Fran spent time helping people debunk all sorts of myths. It's just a case of having a look what's been helpful for you, or indeed tonight, and this might be your first session with us and this is the first experience. So just giving us a feel for what you've made of what you've seen and what's been helpful for you as topics. I think in addition to that, you know, a second point might be, you know, what's been helpful that isn't topical. You know, it might be, you know, the style of the conversations, the people that we've had coming in and their honesty. Obviously, in between these thematic sessions, we've had all sorts of peer discussions, haven't we, that don't get recorded, you know, and actually sometimes keeping it real, talking about it, you know, as a group, and as a group of change makers, and bringing more of our own, you know, personal situations or troubleshooting a challenge might have been helpful for you. Who knows? I'm kind of just throwing things out there that might jog your memories to what's been happening. And apologies if you've just dipped into this and you think, oh, it's my first one, and that, you know, just say whatever you can. But just hearing what's been the highlights would be really helpful in the chat. And then we'll come on to have a look at, you know, some ideas around the what nexts, and some ideas we've got for the summer. We've got some options and opportunities in the summer, some get-togethers that we can, you know, one of the things we know full well is this has all been on Zoom, partly because of the way it was funded, partly because of how damn busy we all are, and just trying to squeeze this in on top of everything else. And the thought of trying to get people in a room to look at this, you know, around the edges just felt too hard. And I think I think it's work doing this remotely, but I think there's an element of real worldness, just to meet, get together and socialize, do a couple of summer socials, and then we'll be guided by people on this call and through a little survey we'll send to others who've been coming to give us a steer really on what they'd like next. We can create more of this. We can create more peer support. We can create podcasts on this stuff, you know, to listen to in a different way and reach more people. We can, in fact, we already are, aren't we? There is a financial resilience podcast just on that point coming out very, very soon. You might hear some of your voices on it with consent, as far as I know. But then clarity and more information is something that's coming along with one-to-ones. We feel like people need to just get with their own expert of choice, and where we can broker that or bring people in a room or facilitate that perhaps through some of the seed fund stuff. There is more seed funding coming. I managed to get a particular backer to contribute, make sure there's more of that. So it's not, you know, it's an ongoing journey, this, that we're trying to do more of between now and the end of the year. So it's not, you have to rush it. You don't think, oh, I've missed my chance, or I've not made my mind up yet. You know, there's a bit more time to think about all this stuff, because like Claire says, and other people and me being rubbish at, you know, at getting back into paying for life insurers, you know, everybody's doing it in their own way and their own pace. So I can see we've got all sorts of things in the chat there. So thank you. I do appreciate you putting some of your thoughts and your highlights, and we'll go back over those after tonight. I'm not necessarily going to, you know, for time, I'm not going to say that. What I'm going to move into, if I'm doing the right thing, Fran, and if you want to sort of stop screen sharing there, I don't know whether you've got any of my questions there, but I think the key thing, I can share the questions so people can see what's coming. If you've got a set, apologies, I've been busy cooking I was almost going to show you, I was busy cooking a Spanish omelette while we were doing this. So I fed the boy, I'm more or less eating it myself, but if we've got questions, we could bring them up just as a kind of teaser for what's coming. And probably in the time we've got, I'll probably focus on a couple of these events that we want to run.
Okay, just bear with me.
I'm only going to pummel you probably with 2 more questions, but I'd like to just show you, if we've got it, apologies, what we think might be useful to ask.
Okay.
So here we go. Oh, this is it. So yeah, we'll come back to this. So this was just to give you a heads up that of what might be coming up. So we've already preempted, apologies, I don't even ask you, but from listening to sessions and topics and stuff where we're creating more conversations about this stuff, we think there's something still to do around understanding, creating and navigating your own game plan. We know everybody's game plan and everybody's life so different that people really need to have some time and some thinking space to get their own action plans together, because, you know, there's no one size fits all. And hearing from people who never realized there was a game plan and didn't have one, but have had to create one and wing it like everyone's winging it, there's a bit more on that, I could just tell. So that's one thing. We've met a wonderful woman. I don't know if any of you have come across her yet on your travels. Oh, this was, sorry, before I talk about May, the one above that is about running a different race to everyone else. You know, there was a lady that I've been talking to recently, and, you know, you get through these situations and nobody would have a clue of the bag of bullshit that you've dealt with along the way. And don't get me wrong, not everyone wants to bear the soul, and it's not necessarily about that. But what it is recognizing that some people are living quite a different life or running a different race for so many different reasons, whether it's about something that's happened to them, whether it's about something traumatic that's occurred, whether it's about just something out of this world that you wouldn't imagine that's kind of flipped things on the head, whether it's about relationship stuff, whatever it is, changing circumstance, just all sorts. There's definitely something to hear, more to hear from people who've been, you know, running a different race to some degree, and how, you know, barriers after barriers and just unbelievable stuff is helpful to hear sometimes, both from different creative ways that people have navigated these things, but also just from you know, shock and awe perspective. I don't know.
And that's where our case studies really come in, don't they?
Yeah,
which we're going to kind of rehash and share with you. We haven't quite decided in what format, whether that's going to be blogs or whatever it may be, but kind of preempting this program and what informed its creation and sort of, I suppose, direction was that we took a sample of diverse women and did some case studies and some kind of in-depth interviews about,
and women from across the Flourish Network, weren't they? They're all people who've been on Time to Grow,
exactly that,
we've supported for a good few years, or maybe they're a mentor to some of the people we support.
Yeah, and you know, it could be summarized beautifully in terms of running a different race to everyone else, and they would say the same. So it's always good when we do these things and we talk about finance, to kind of see that it can be done and it is being done, and that no matter what the barrier, it can be moved to one side and we can navigate around it. So that's just pause for thought in terms of what's coming through the pipeline. Sorry, Nicola.
No, that's really good. And you'll see there's more on housing and all of that malarkey, and more on wills and pensions, because, you know, one session's never enough for this stuff. With, you know, and maybe even see if we can get a handful of reputable people where people might be able to get a follow-up call and prompt that one-to-one, or prompt that listen to an expert type stuff, and see what the next steps are for you, or the costs are, or the simplicity of whatever it is you might want to do. I did just mention May a minute ago. I know some of you on this call will have met May. May's come via Proper Good, the way we've been doing quite a bit of work around Stockport lately, and she's in the hub tomorrow, by the way. This was the other week. She's not in there tomorrow, but basically she's running some great stuff. So the CIC that we've helped to set up is called Talk About Money, and it is basically, it's Talk About Money CIC. What could be more simple? And she's basically helping people from all walks of life, really different walks of life, learn how to manage their money better. And she's got some very simple, very clear, and she's just very pragmatic, very straightforward, as Claire's, but lovely and really knowledgeable. Just ace. We like her a lot, and we're very glad that we found her, because she's already backed by Unlimited, I believe, to do some stuff generally, but then there's more we can do together. So she has a registered office address at our new hub. We've let her do that, and we're hoping, you know, we can do more work together. So that's just a flavour, and I can see some of you have put some thoughts in there on what jumps out for you as being of interest, which is really helpful. If there's anything that you think, oh yeah, that sounds like that's for me, pop it in the chat, and we'll bear that in mind, as clearly there's a need for this stuff. Likewise, if you're looking at that and you're thinking, oh, I wanted more on this, or well, I really hoped that you might talk about this, or maybe there's certain, I don't know, people, organisations, stuff where you've, along your travels and your awareness has been raised a bit more about all these topics, you've spotted something that would be helpful to bring to the table, bring to this group, discuss in peer sessions, whatever, pop that in the chat and we can weave that in as we go. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we focus these Flourishing Futures session on personal resilience, personal finance, personal circumstances, which is a little bit different from our other work, which is all about enterprise development, enterprise growth, and starting and scaling and all of that stuff. But certainly within our Flourishing Fridays, which are all about social enterprise support, or some of our future Time to Grow programs and other programs, helping people look at how they price better, price the products and services, build their confidence for closing, finding the work, closing the deals, and all of that jazz, let alone financial forecasting better for the future. And some of you will have met people like Gurge, who we've been sort of bringing into the fold for the last few years, who's really good at this stuff. And there's a handful of other trusted contacts who are just helpful when it comes to taking the fear out of finance, for you and your business, let alone in your personal life, or your project planning, budget planning, and all of that. So for running what you're doing is something we can build in. Yeah, so any other thoughts that you've got there on topics and themes, whack them in the chat and we'll have a good read back through over those. I think the last kind of questions for this, I said I was only going to ask 3, but there's a few there. So yeah, we were saying, tell us your top 3, that's fine. What are the topics? And there might be things that you'd like to share, or you'd know what, and you might not want to put them in the chat, but let us know, email us. If there's things where you think, actually, I'd love to bring this for discussion or to the table, or I'd happily talk about this. What we've tried to do is really bring people in from our network to share lived experience, because that's often what sparks thinking the most. It's all well and good bringing in these experts, or these people from their corporate lives, or whatever it might be, but if that's a million miles away from where we're at, then we need to make sure we're telling the tales and hearing the voices and sharing the messages of people that will resonate with who we're working with. So there's many more, you know, the likes of Asma, who has been on these calls, the likes of Simone, the likes of a number of you here on the chat. We'll invite you, if for people who are happy to share or get involved or be on a bit of a discussion, you know, be prodded and poked by Fran, you know, to be part of these discussions. So hopefully people will be open to that within reason. The last couple of questions are just very practical. We just wondered, is Wednesday evening working? We kind of peaks and troughs in terms of numbers. Granted, we've got the sunshine out with us, and you know, kids are starting to finish exams and who knows what. There's loads, everybody's got hay fever at the moment, so but it'd be really helpful to understand, should we stick with a Wednesday evening? Should we get moved to a Monday evening or some other evening? How would Saturday mornings be? This will probably come out in a survey, but any steer you can give us in the chat or through talking to us, we'll happily have a think around, you know, well, we've got the chance, and it might be evenings aren't good anyway, but I think given who we're working with and everybody's busy and you're running your business and all the rest of it, we just felt that evenings are, although it can be a pain with kids and life and stuff going on, this 5, what are we, 5? No, it's not 5, 6 till 8 window, just get them fed if you've got them, and park them for a minute, slap them in front of the telly, whatever it is, while they're busy playing basketball, you can dial in from the car. It's that juggling act that everyone's doing, we hope, sort of weaves in a little bit, and then yeah, feel free to put your thoughts on any logistics changes that we should be doing. And last but not least, the kind of slightly more fun bit, or 2 more fun bits. One is around the summer. So we promised we'd get together, there's budget to bring us together, and we've got 3 ideas, and 3 sounds like a lot, and we can do all 3, or there might be a glaringly obvious one, and we'll guide that from tonight and a bit of survey work. But option number 1 is we can just get together, go out for a meal. There's budget probably to pay, I don't know, a tenner a head, and then, you know, some money towards transport for those that would need that, and we can just meet in Manchester and go for something to eat and just chat, meet. We might talk about money, we might not, but it'd be just good to get people off Zoom and catching up and have a bit of a summer social. So that's option number 1, that we probably just put it out there, head somewhere, and hope that a chunk of people can manage to make that. Option number 2 is happening anyway. So option number 2 is we've got our first pop-up spa, for those of you that haven't seen us advertising this yet. First pop-up spa, which is basically it's an event where people can come and get a bit of chilled out time. There'll be a couple of talks. There's some little mini treatments in, like, I don't know, mini manicure, mini pedicure, for those that don't want to have a massage and stuff. Or there's back, neck and shoulder and Indian head massage for those that would be into that sort of thing. And probably some reflexology, thinking about it as well. So basically, I'm more than up for offering everybody who's been on the programme here a ticket to our July session, which is on a Sunday, 2nd of July, in our Heaton Chapel hub. That might not be convenient for everybody, but the offer's there, the opportunity's there, and we'll send people that message so they know that they've got, you know, they'll have the, you know, money to cover a massage and travel costs if they need that. And then last but not least, I think this will get saved, if I'm being perfectly honest, till September, that is that getting people together for those one-to-ones. So basically bringing people in a room where, you know, we can chat, we can have a few talks, and we can have those experts on hand. So I'm talking a lot there, but it'd be fab. I don't know if you want to stop sharing, Fran, and it'd be great to just, before we sort of start to head off and let you get back to your lives, anything that we've said helpful, useful, something you're up for? I guess that's from the physical meetup. So going out for a bit of a meal, catching up, getting together, and just getting off Zoom is, you know, there's the spas. Yeah, so whether or not the 2nd of July works, we can offer that. It'd be great to see you in July. There's another one in September. So whether you come to July or September, you know, you've got the option to come to one of those, or come to both. And then there's creating a bit more of a, I don't know what word to use, like a mini, it's not a conference at all, it won't be that grandiose, but having people where we've got a room to chat and have talks, and we've got a room to chat to a guru, I guess, and along some of these themes that we've been talking about. So over to you for just any thoughts on what we're suggesting.
Just yes to everything.
Okay, cool. Let's hope the dates work. That's always a killer, isn't it? Life,
So
busyness.
that's Sunday, the pop-up spa.
Mm.
It's a kid-free weekend, so
Yay.
that'll be a
Come on
nice
now.
treat for myself.
Yeah, get yourself booked in. Well, yeah, the way to let me know on that one, ideally, and it'll come out in an email anyway, is the Eventbrite link. In fact, I'll put the Eventbrite link in the chat now, and at least people have got that to mull over. But anybody, any other thoughts on some of these ideas, and what if there's anything that you think's likely that you'd like to get involved with, or something that's going to be a struggle to commit to get along to?
I like the idea of number 3. I'm actually going to be moving house in July, so that one's out for me. But I, just on a personal note, I'd really struggle to go out for a meal and stuff, which is totally fine. I'm happy to not come if people want to do that. So number 3 feels good for me.
Was that the pop-up spa stuff, or was that no? That was the getting together and getting some stuff done.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, and that's coming. And there's other options as well. There's we'll have a little look and a little think.
Kirsty, you moving house?
Yeah, Phoebe, that's why I missed a few, because I was really dysregulated, because my landlord let me know a few weeks ago that he was selling the house that I live in. Yeah. So I've had a bit of a nightmare, and I ended up missing I think I've missed 3 of these because I was just so stressed about it. But thankfully I found somewhere on Friday and I've been accepted, and it's really nice. But it doesn't mean that I'm now moving, which is good, because I'm all right at the practical stuff. That's fine, I can sort that out. It was the uncertainty and just that panic of not having anywhere, and which ironically then meant that I missed these, which we've all been talking about this.
Well, they're all recorded. That's the beauty of most of them, and there'll be more stuff coming up post. It sounds like you probably just need to get moved and get settled, and there's other things we can do. We've got our as Flourishing Friday events and other things, so we'll see where we get with some of that. Looks like Jasmine's up for a meal. Hopefully Jasmine, our pop-up spas, we can collaborate now, so I'll shout you another time. But we'll Jasmine and a number of people that she works with, we help train them all up, and they now run their own pop-up spas. So we could have some pop-up spa road shows and go to Little Hulton or come to Heaton Chapel and vice versa. so options there. Anybody, any other thoughts, or anything in particular based on what we've said there? Certainly, just checking. Yeah, no worries. Well, we'll send, like I say, bits of surveys and other bits and bobs about, just to take some wider feedback from the group that could come tonight. And it was just that last but not least bit to remind people that with us having our sort of Women Changemaker fund there, to look at overcoming of barriers or overcoming of hurdles to things, at least now through your own thinking. Some people have already applied for this stuff, so we've got somebody who needed to just replace a phone. They couldn't function because they haven't got their phone. We've got people who what else, needed some legal support and legal advice, so some cash to cover some of that. I remember various bits and pieces. So there's as long as it's legal and as long as it's helping your sort of personal development and financial resilience, then just let us know what it is, what you might need this for, and how it might help you, and what the difference now would make. The only judgments that we've really got around it is this a good use of an investment, and what difference will it make now? Can it wait, or is now the time? And but in saying that, I wouldn't want people to put off applying because I think, oh no, somebody else probably needs the money, because I know how altruistic everybody is. But I think, if something's coming to mind, or having been inspired from tonight, you want to relook at whatever it is, life insurance or wills or anything else, then doing a little bit of research into that and putting an ask in is something that we can look at as well. So anyway, that's me waffling on. So thank you for your feedback and thoughts in the chat. I'm just going to hand back to Fran, because she's obviously come back from wherever she went, disappearing.
Yes,
And do you want to wrap up the session for us, Fran?
Absolutely. Well, as is always the case, it's a big thank you for attending, for engaging, and for being completely transparent in what you need and where you're at, which is all we wanted from this, really, was for just to give open forum, to give you a bit of signposting and advice. More than that, thank you to Helen, who jumped on and gave us some insights and the sort of human factor of what it is to be an empowered woman who's worked in financial services, who recognises the need for the essentials, the fundamentals, but also the difficulty of what that really means in 2023. As is always the case, Stacey's left us to move on to our next webinar because she's a much sought after woman, and for good reason. I'm sure you'll all agree. She is just a fountain of knowledge and authenticity. So it's a thank you to Stacey for that. Off the back of what Nicola said, in terms of evaluation, a survey will be coming out to you, kind of just to summarise your thoughts, feelings and opinions as we move forward and develop. I, for one, think if we all get together for a bit of food and a bit of a chat and to just put some faces to names as opposed to the virtual reality of this, it would be delightful, because that's what we want. I'm not a hugger, be warned. If anyone requires that, go to Nicola. She's much more warm and fuzzy than I am.
Well, I'm a bit of an ice queen, really, but I will give a hug here and there.
Nobody believes you're an ice cream. You've got the biggest heart in Manchester. But outside of that, guys, yes, obviously we've got our next peer session on Wednesday, the 28th of June. That will be kind of debunking this and getting to the nitty-gritty of it, of how we really feel. But equally, we are going to have a legal expert coming in on the tail end of that, just to give us some pragmatic advice. They couldn't be here tonight, so they have assured me they'll pop in just for a little wrap around. So no, lots of warm and fuzzies to come, as is always the case. Phoebe, I love that you're here for the peer support. I'm
doing the Vox Pop tonight when I'm going to go and pick him up from gymnastics now, and I'm going to record your Vox Pop that you keep pestering me about.
Awesome.
Well, maybe yes. Listen, I'm all for, again, it's that beautiful summary, and when me and Nicola are also putting together delightful podcasts, nobody just wants to hear me and Nicola's dulcet tones. They want to hear people who've actually been here with us. As nice as it is to facilitate, what we want to hear is your thoughts and opinions, because ultimately that's what we're doing it for. It's not for us, it's for you. Although Nicola is going to go and consolidate those pensions and draw up a will on one of her many notebooks and napkins and flyers and beer mats, I imagine.
Yeah, and post-it notes, so don't forget the post-it notes.
Absolutely, every colour of the rainbow. It's Pride Month at Nicola's. Good. Right, guys, I hope tonight's been helpful. As I say, I'm going to follow up with an email with resources to support and signpost, because that's what we're here for. Otherwise, I will see you Wednesday 28th. I will make sure you've all got that Zoom link and a reminder. If you need us, reach out on email, but otherwise get chatting on socials. That's what we want at Flourish Together, CIC, plug, hashtag FFS. Finding financial security, FFS. Otherwise it gets lost,
but we will. And I've just put the it'll come out in the email, but I've just put the link to the collection of pop-up spa events. So coming along to the one in July is an option, to just come and chill out or hear some of the talks, or maybe you run things and you like to do a talk, or maybe we should have as much as we can talk about, whatever, nutrition and mindfulness and what else people talking about, all sorts, creative well-being, financial resilience, and we could bring we could bring will specialists into those while you're waiting for your treatment, or you can be getting your will sorted. So yeah, we've got to pack it in while we can. So.
Put will out.
Yeah, exactly. Fabulous. Oh, well, thank you so much. And thank you so much to Fran. I mean, I know you've got your next session in a couple of weeks, and we're glad we've got that time to debunk, as you say. But huge thanks to Fran for curating all of this. As much as I've said, can we do this? And we should do that. And we need these themes. And, Fran's just picked it up and run with it. So huge thanks to Fran. And yeah, everybody who's contributing.
Sending you random things on Instagram. I keep people. You're now my finance person. So if I find something online that's financy, it's going to you. I'm sorry.
I love it. Honestly, Claire, I am here for it. I love popping on Insta and seeing that you've seen something. And as a teacher, it's like you're a good student and you go, oh my God, have you seen this? And then I get to share it. I'm here
It's
for it.
because she's a
Listen.
teacher herself. She knows how to play
We
teacher's
can't help
pet.
it. We can't help it. But to that
Oh.
end, guys, don't be shy. If you see something on Instagram, if you see something on TikTok, like Stacey recommended, send it to me. You know, ultimately what we're building is a mega resource that we can send out at the end of this program as we move forward into September. So you've got something to get your teeth into over summer to really kind of get those wheels turning. So if you see it, send it. Don't be shy. And Claire, absolutely, I'll be waiting. Okay, good.
Fabulous.
Right,
on that note, we shall pause our recording and see people soon.
Indeed. Delightful as always. Take care, everybody.
Bye.